All right. Hi, everybody. Welcome to our monthly Q&A for Talking Feds. This has been a really exciting month. We have a boatload of questions to answer, understandably, about the hearings that have been going on recently. So let's just jump right into it. Our first question is it possible that the reason the DOJ has not moved on Mark Meadows is because he's secretly working with the January 6th committee?
Yeah, so it's a great question. Hi, everyone, by the way. Thanks for joining. It's consistent with the long silence, but they specifically declined to process and they notified him. And if they were really cooperating, you'd be thinking more likely they would hold it over their head, or if they dismissed it as part of some plea arrangement, I think we would have had more indication of filing in court even under seal. So, Meadows holds the keys to the kingdom and maybe himself has criminal exposure. And it's he more than anyone, it's kind of an outrage. Former member of Congress, lifetime public official, is stiffing the committee and the American people. But that said, I think it's possible, yes, but very unlikely from the facts out there that he is a cooperator at this point.
Great. Next one is, let's see. Oh, here's one. Could the findings of the committee lead to legal barriers or safeguards of any kind against election deniers who now hold positions as state or county election commissioners? Are there legal avenues to challenge them if they refuse to certify 2024 votes?
So yeah, I mean, there you may have noticed that Republicans are always challenging any subpoena they get by saying they don't have a legitimate function, and they're always responding, "Sure, we do." Among other things, we could propose legislative fixes, but first we have to figure out what's going on. So they could very well change the laws in ways that would make it harder to have that sort of mischief. And indeed, there's a statute up there that's one of the three or four that are considered the most important, but then nevertheless are held hostage to the filibuster, so needing to have 10 Republican votes. That would be a big fix on all this stuff they are doing. Right now, as of yet, no fix. And in the meantime, sort of highway robbery in plain sight, there are many states already enacting hugely restrictive laws. Florida and Texas are good examples that are going to make it harder and absent some sort of federal solution. And even a federal solution is going to be a little tricky because the previous regime, to the extent it's already in place, it'll make it harder to dislodge it for the next election. So short answer is yes, either growing out of the committee or growing out of a previous effort, but requires 10 Republicans or a filibuster suspension by the Dems. So it's, I think, couldn't be, imperative and yet unlikely. Tough combination.
Yeah, common theme of states jumping on that restrictive
Yeah.
policy lately. Um, Donahue and Rosen told Trump they and their DOJ colleagues would resign en masse were he to appoint Clark Attorney General, and that would be a bad look for him. Why didn't Trump call their bluff? Do you think they really would have resigned and taken staff with them? Since when did Trump worry about how something looked? And what is Clark's status in DC now in terms of reputation and legal culpability?
All right. So that second question is the hardest of three. When did he care? But I can answer the first and third. No doubt about it. They were absolutely ready to resign, not just them. Stephen Engel, they, by the way, were both acting. The people who had been in their position had already left. And so they're in there. But Stephen Engel has been there from the start. In this meeting, Trump turns to him, his good old buddy, Steve Engel, who he put in. Now, you wouldn't leave, would you, Steve? Yes, I would, Mr. President. So it would have really been en masse. And there would have been a lot of people, career people even, who would have enjoyed putting in the knife with them. So it would have made the Saturday Night Massacre in the Watergate era look like an intimate affair. I think, literally there could have been 100. Um, so now going to the second point, it could have made him conclude, not just a blow. What does he care about the blow when he's going out? But that it would indeed so emphatically infamously portrayed that what he was doing was illegal, that they never would have been able to get away with it. Any letter from Clark, the remaining kind of last rat on the ship, wouldn't have had much of an effect. And the third, where is Clark now? He and John Eastman, they're former Washington guys who are just trying to keep their head low and stay out of jail. He's got a criminal defense lawyer. He's going to figure very large in a hearing next week, and he's going to be portrayed as the central villain. So both of them are, kind of victims of sort of a perfect Trump management style. They're basically middle management pipsqueak types, excuse the disparagement, who had their head turned by the whiff of ambition. Trump was going to make Clark attorney general. At one point, unbelievable, he turns to Rosen, the AG, and said, if you will sign on this letter with me, I'll let you stay as attorney general, or something like, the power, he was so besotted, had gone to his head. Same thing with Eastman today. Did you guys, if you saw the hearing, he's there at the hearing with his hat and pounding table and being a sort of hero for a few seconds. And of course, that ambition's the perfect thing for Trump to exploit. And now both of them, they're ruined. They're both of them are completely ruined. And they'll never get a job in a respectable firm in Washington. It's a complete disaster. They gambled a really stupid gamble and lost. And the only question is, will they stay out of jail?
Yep. Next one is, can Harry or anyone explain how mens rea works with the ignorance is no excuse I've thought was true for years?
Well, there must be somebody. Oh, I guess I'm the only guy here, though. So let me try. Yeah, I can. So first, ignorance is no excuse is a useful and accurate watchword, but one that refers to the existence of a law. So if you do something bad, you're going 90 miles an hour, you can, oh, I didn't know that was the speed limit. Doesn't matter what you're doing, is going at a reckless speed. But now let's go to mens rea for him. So ignorance of the law would be something like his saying, I actually didn't know it was against the law to try to impair the congressional proceedings. And as to that, a court or anyone would say, we don't care. Ignorance of the law is no excuse. You knew what you were doing, and that's against the law. So what he's trying to do instead with his exotic, what I've come to call the Kool-Aid defense, is say, I didn't think it was wrong to impair the proceeding because I felt I had won. But that really is everybody on TV has said, well, what if he really thought he was one? How can you know if he didn't think he was one? But if you take a step back for a second, my most recent article touches on this in the LA Times. It doesn't matter. And so people have whiffed on this. The mens rea is precisely the mental state with which one does a prohibited act. And the prohibited act here, there are a few depending on what the crime is, but let's go to the questioner's example of impairing the proceeding. Does he knowingly delay or impair the proceeding? You bet he does. And even if it's irrelevant to that analysis whether he thinks he's doing it because he really won, or whether he's taking orders from Putin or trying to serve world peace in some way. What the mens rea question is, does he know he's impairing the proceeding? And that's just clear. Now, in addition to that, to the extent he tries to say, I thought I'd won, what that technically would be is a justification under criminal law, and a lousy one. It wouldn't fly to say he thought he won. But on its own terms, on the facts, a jury could well say, "Oh, we don't, you're a lying sack. We don't believe it because look at all this evidence. For instance, you started saying this before any of the numbers came in." Or they could, a judge could, if the prosecutors asked, maybe charge them, if you find willful blindness, he purposely didn't listen to people telling him that this was against the law. You can, that's the same as knowledge. But the big point, and it's perfectly framed by the question of what's mens rea, is it doesn't matter because the mental state for the crime of impairing the proceeding is knowing you're impairing the proceeding. If he thinks he won, he should go to court, as he did. He only lost 60 times. It wouldn't justify under the law what he, impairing or delaying the proceeding, which is what he used it for. So at the end of the day, a properly charged jury, unless a judge were to be confused about this, would not take as basically irrelevant whether Trump really believed it. One more point on this. It's possible to try to get in other ways, like a shrink report or something. But basically, if he's a criminal defendant and he wants to say, I really thought, he pretty much has to testify. Donald Trump testifies, there's going to be, viscera and wisps of orange hair and blood all over the floor. It's going to be a bloodbath. And yet that's the only way he can do it. So that would be, in some ways, a satisfying day to watch him try.
Yeah. Next one is, from the evidence presented in the January 6th hearing so far, do you think Garland would feel highly confident that a jury would convict Trump? I realize Garland may refrain based on other considerations, e.g., precedents or civil unrest.
By the way, that's a great question and a great way to put it, is that with that little footnote that you just always have to put in there. He could find that there's evidence, but that it's not the end of the inquiry with indicting a former president. Short answer is yes. And it's not, I mean, I think it was there already, or here's the better way to put it. I mean, Garland would be aware, he's watching it, his prosecutors are watching it. It's not the same. They've got to consider what would it look like in a real courtroom with defense on the other side and good lawyers and the like. But I think when they look, give that a cold-eyed look with the evidence from the committee and the evidence they're going to be able to develop themselves, they're going to find, yes, and this is what you have to find under the principles of federal prosecution. He's guilty, so it's a righteous case. And you could say that whether or not, maybe you can't use all the evidence, but you got to think he's guilty. Can't think you're, railroading someone. And you got to think that a conviction is probable. With the evidence they have, I think it's they're already over that threshold. I mean, it's already there for them to get over the threshold. They're making their way up, and I don't think they've yet really zeroed in on Trump and done a sort of final. This is going to be a big memo that would say, here's why we think we can convict him, and memo for the attorney general and deputy attorney general. But short answer, yeah, it's there. They got the goods to convict him.
Nice. Another legal quiz for you. When Judge Ludig used the words clear and present danger, what was he saying from a legal point of view?
That's interesting because people fastened on to that right away. I did Deadline right after, and Frank Figliuzzi made a point of it. So clear and present danger has a meaning in the law. It's true. And it's from the First Amendment law. And that's, you say something, and if you're, say here, let's say his words showed a clear and present danger of tearing Mike Pence limb from limb, then they wouldn't have First Amendment protection. So if there's a clear and present danger that what you're saying, or of imminent harm, then First Amendment protection goes away. It seems like, I mean, he's a judge. I don't think he would have used it accidentally without meaning something like that. But he was saying something, I think, a little different and more colloquial, the way you or I or Kalena would use clear and present danger, which is just like, these guys aren't done. They want to, I'm not just giving you a history lesson here. There are people afoot trying to do this in 22, 24. We're still in the soup, and things really have to be done to get us out. I think he meant it in that sort of normal conversational way. Although, a fair point on Frank Figliuzzi's part, it is a sort of legal term of art as well. And you could see us using that way, but that would be normally what you would use for, immediately that's the classic fire in a crowded theater kind of idea. Like right away, people stampede, it's a problem, no First Amendment protection. Whereas the dangers we're experiencing now, we can see them developing in real time and possibly playing out in November or 2.5 years from now.
Yeah. Staying on the point of Judge Ludig,
Mhm.
another one that we have is, do you think Judge Ludig's convoluted, rambling answers hurt his credibility with everyday Americans? He seemed like a hostile witness.
It's interesting. I've heard a lot of variations on that theme, and that the first half lagged, etc. This, I guess, is a insider lawyer's perspective or whatever, because he wasn't, I think, rambling. In fact, if you see the transcript, he was very precise, but he was slow. He's a Southerner, and he's got a little bit of a drawl anyway. But I think he was talking and seeking to talk emphatically and deliberately, and for you can like contrast or juxtapose that with like Eastman and Giuliani frothing basically on the ellipse. He was being very lawyerly or judicious, and if you know that culture, as say I do, it came home that way. I wasn't at all bored. I was, each word one foot in front of the other. And it was a lot. This is a really respected, deeply conservative federal judge. And that's there are many lawyers who speak and speak to judges that way for added emphasis and precision. So that's what I think he was trying to do, even though non-lawyers, I know a lot of them found it ponderous.
Great. Next one is, what do you make of Benny Thompson pushing the committee tip line today in view of the fact that a lot of new relevant material is coming in?
Yeah, so I don't know exactly, but they are definitely shaking things loose, it seems. And my personal surmise is the postponement of the Jeff Clark hearing was not because or simply because there was they needed more time for their tired aides to do the video demonstratives. I think more stuff is flowing their way, and from different sources. Also, remember, it's gonna. This is the high watermark of attention by the American people. There are still something like 350 unidentified assailants who were on the ellipse. They still don't know. We don't know who put up the gallows that was, supposedly to be used to hang Mike Pence. There's stuff out there that people don't know, and this is a good time to get it with maximum attention being paid. Nevertheless, I think there's specific things going on with respect to aspects of this story that they would really like to supplement. Their whole exercise has been a very successful one of filling in holes. Mark Meadows or Dan Scavino or Mike Pence or, oh my God, Donald Trump could give them so much information. They won't, they don't. And instead, they're very adroitly using diverse sources. So we had heard before that we heard about Pence's side where he gets reamed out by Trump today. They doubled back and got a couple witnesses, including a staffer who was just, had one foot in the Oval Office of Trump's tone and his disgusting diatribe to Pence. And they're doing that generally, and part of it is what they get from people. I have no. They have. It's the best investigative committee I think that Congress has ever had, and they're big and they fan out. And if somebody has some important information to give, I'm sure they go interview them right away. and there are particular holes to fill, and then just generally, it's they want to get the comprehensive story, which is what they've promised.
Yeah, great. Next one is, will the public ever have access to all the evidence the committee has collected, such as full tape depositions?
Yes, I think so.
Quick one. That was the quickest one ever.
Ever? Okay, I'll see if I can beat that once too.
I think that was maybe 5 words.
Four. I know from
4.
Talking Five how many words are
Oh,
five and
yeah.
four. Yes, I think so. You were counting the comma, I guess. That's all
One day
right.
we'll get just a yes.
I've done that before. Okay.
So,
Good.
yeah.
Actually, I'll sometimes do like on TV, and the host will be like, "Okay."
I know, you caught me off guard.
Yeah.
Is the committee ever going to address the members of Congress who were complicit in this coup?
Sure ought to. And they've got five in particular. They've addressed them, and the five gave them the middle finger. And I mean, it's just another example, like Mark Meadows. They know stuff. And it's a joke now to try to maintain that this isn't a deadly serious, hugely important episode in American history. They've been quiet. And I think the talking point of, oh, it's just a political theater, whatever, it just won't hunt. And then that's one of the reasons it won't, I think, is because they've used Republicans so effectively. So those five are scoundrels, right? If nothing else, just they need to give their versions. And by the way, everyone who isn't giving their version, I can see why. You can see why Eastman took the fifth. You can see why Clark took the fifth. You can see why Meadows isn't cooperating. But with every hearing, they're getting clobbered because there's one-sided presentations, and they're not there to defend themselves, and it's going to be this sort of official version. So I would have thought that the best time, as soon as they were getting jerked around by the five, would be to have immediately referred them to contempt for contempt. Unlike Mark Meadows or Dan Scavino, there's no argument of privilege between them and the president. And it's quite clear they can be subpoenaed, even though it's an aggressive political and unusual move to your colleague. So I think they should have made quick work of them. And I think the DOJ would have made quick work. They're under their contempt. But I think they are staying their hands, apparently, just because they're taking on so much and so much water. They think this is it's just a little bit too much to step on that hornet's nest. And of course, come November, Kevin McCarthy might be Speaker of the House. The answer to that ought to be, well, if he has something like this that's fair, then let him use it. But they know, in fact, that won't be the standard. The standard will be, who can I subpoena and when, and how can I impeach? And that's just who the Republican Party in 2022 is. But, that's part of what they're thinking. Of course, would their staying their hand now make it unlikely that McCarthy and his rogues gallery will go ahead if they've got the gavel? Doesn't seem too likely to me.
Yeah. Speaking of the fifth, we have another question that is it true that if they plead the fifth, then they can't defend themselves at a trial? If found guilty, they'll just go to jail.
Give that to me again. I'm not sure I got it.
Is it true that if you plead the fifth, then you can't defend yourself at a trial? If found guilty, you go to jail.
The short answer is, if you plead it before, you're not bound to plead it forever. You can always say, okay, now I want to talk. And if you plead it or don't plead it and you testify and you're found guilty, you go to jail. So, they're obviously making a strategic call that it's better off without the information that I could give and as testimony against myself. It's the better way to stay out of jail. But it just affects what the evidentiary record is and whether you can prove beyond a reasonable doubt. We just saw the Sussman trial. He didn't testify. He was acquitted. And the jury took its job seriously of saying, nothing, can't show this beyond a reasonable doubt. If he had testified, maybe they would have been able on cross-examination to get enough intent evidence to make the argument, et cetera. So no, it's just a strategic calculation, and you can get convicted or not, depending. But they're gambling that they won't. And by the way, they look terrible. And by the way, too, this hearing is not a criminal trial. And if it's not a criminal trial, in a criminal trial, a prosecutor can't comment on a defendant's invocation of the Fifth Amendment. It's a strict Supreme Court rule. It's a violation itself. Not so for a civil proceeding, not so for a congressional hearing. So you heard today Liz Cheney say Eastman took the Fifth 150 times, and you saw him do it again and again. After a while, he was just saying five, 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 again and again. And why did they do it? Because it makes him look guilty as shit. And that's exactly the price he pays for it in the civil hearing. I don't think he has many people now who think he's an honorable guy who's just keeping his own counsel. He's got criminal exposure, and they know it.
Yeah. Let's see if we can just push a couple more out here. We've just got a little over 5 minutes left, so we have time to wrap up. Is there any way that Trump could have issued pardons that we don't know about yet, like a sort of pocket pardon?
No. There, but okay, I'll elaborate a little. The reason why is what you have to. There are some legal requirements of specifying, et cetera. But moreover, pardons and pardon records come from the White House counsel's office. So if he had done it, if somebody wants to say, "Hey, I've been pardoned," they need a record of it. And where's that record now? It's in the White House counsel's office, meaning it's under Biden's control. So it would be irregular and probably illegal to try to do, because the only check on a pardon, since the power is so plenary, is a political check. For those of you who remember the Bill Clinton, Mark Rich brouhaha, that's the only sort of check there is. But second, it would be, you couldn't call up Trump and Mar-a-Lago to say, "Oh, here's my email." It would have to be now under the stewardship of the current White House counsel, who, by the way, resigned yesterday. There's going to be a new one in about a week. We're having sort of a bit of musical chairs, has happened some at the mid-year point, but also may reflect, now I'm out of my depth, but may reflect the kind of political doldrums of the Biden White House right now.
Yeah. All right. One more is, are we going to hear anything about the Green Bay sweep that Navarro talked about, and which Republican congresspeople were in on that scheme?
I can do two more. I'll do this quick. So, I think so. Well, look, we don't know. They've got the info on it, obviously, and they're just curating really carefully to pack things into 90 minute chunks. But so that's what that was about, by the way, just so you know. Green Bay sweep, one after another after the other, off tackle play. Same here. Everyone would object, and it would go, and each has a right to 2 hours, as you actually happen on the sticks. And if everyone did, it would just gum up the works so badly that chaos would ensue and the vote wouldn't take place in time. So that's what Navarro was doing. He's just a trade rep in the White House. Has he been in touch with members of Congress? We don't really know, but you couldn't have done this effectively without the support and intervention of members of Congress. They got to, get together in the huddle. Okay, Cruz, you got Wisconsin. You got, Josh Hawley, you got et cetera. So probably we just don't know yet how far it went. One more. I can do it.
Nice. Last one. This one is a little bit of I think, a free speech quiz, another legal quiz. The U.S.
I'm a professor.
You're helping me for next year. You're helping me review my comma.
Right. Does everyone know that Colena's going to be a first-year law student next year? She's gotten the bug from,
I just got my sweatshirt
her
today.
Talking Feds time. Okay, go ahead.
All right. The U.S. outlawed subliminal advertising back in 1958 to prevent, for example, making moviegoers want to buy popcorn and Coke. Federal and state laws both also make fake advertising illegal. So why is it that Fox News Channel is allowed to leave the Fox News logo in the corner of the TV screen while opinion hosts like Hannity or Carlson spin their alternative reality? I love this question.
All right,
even
first of
the
all,
news
subliminal
hosts lace their
wasn't
reporting with snarky
overruled.
opinions, et cetera, et cetera.
Regulate.
Shouldn't the FCC make them remove the logo?
You can regulate false advertising. It's true. Somebody could try to go after Fox as not a real network, the most watched in America. Good luck. I'll just say there's one that I've made my small little contribution here. I always was fairly proud about doing every network, including Fox, thinking 2 or 3 people would listen to me, et cetera. But with these recent spate of revelations, it just feels to me like that really isn't a news organization, and going on them treats it like one. So I have myself stopped doing Fox News. I don't think the FCC is going to ever take away the license, though. That for USA versus Murdoch, that could be a fun one. All right, everyone, quite a month. And next month, we're going to have a whole spate of Supreme Court opinions. They're coming out next week to talk about, and there's going to be some barn burners. So talk to you then. And if anything otherwise comes up and you want like a question for Talking Five or a sidebar, just send a tweet
Mhm.
or where should they write, Kalena?
In the meantime, I always pick out our website mail for these
Yeah.
Q&As too. A lot of our questions come from our website mail. So if you guys have a question and there's not a Q&A coming up anytime soon, you can totally feel free to
Just
just
bring it
send
on.
us
It's
mail
good. In
on our
fact,
website on
we
our
hope you
website contact
will
form.
give, Talking Five questions, sidebar
Yep.
questions. We could use the ideas ourselves.
Oh yeah. All right. Thank you so much, everybody. See you next month.
Bye.
Bye.